Um, Ultimately, what I'm here to talk about today is country and western songs that are about Hawaii. And the reason why, um, how did I get into this? I started talking about western swing, which was the one of the first types of music that used Fender electric guitars like Stratocaster and Telecaster. Western swing was one of the first types of music that was really going strong still in 1954. No, from the beginning, like they were using Telecasters and Stratocasters right from the moment that they were invented by Fender. But before that, they were using steel guitars in country and western music, and uh, country. You, my understanding anyway is that like mainstream or classic country and western music kind of stemmed from western swing, and that's just because Western swing was something that a lot of people were doing. Anybody who was playing Western music started swinging it when swing was popular in the 1940s, especially. During World War II, swing was the most popular music. And so there was all these servicemen going through the port of Los Angeles, and they wanted to see Western swing, like Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys were playing it, and in Los Angeles they had really big like dances during World War II, especially on the Venice Pier. They had this one famous dance where they had 15,000 people, and it was like the pier was bending. There were so many people on the pier. They were afraid that it was going to collapse. Anyway, the servicemen loved Western swing and swing music in general, but especially Western swing. And the genre itself, you know, when they started classifying music that way, it was something that was coined by this guy, Spade Cooley, who ended up badly, and he's not a popular historical figure because of that. But at one point there was this dispute because Spade Cooley won this contest to see who was the real king of swing, and Benny Goodman was in the contest, and Benny Goodman is considered the king of swing, but he didn't win the contest. Spade Cooley won the contest. Well, Bob Wills was also in the contest, and he also lost. So the Spade Cooley won the contest, and they didn't want to say that he was the king of swing, so they said that he was the king of Western swing. But like I said, if you read about him, you'll see that he didn't. You can see why nobody wants to honor him. If you read his biography, I won't get into it right now. But so anyway, I was just wondering, like. Is it appropriate for me to really want to buy a Fender ukulele to play surf music on if I'm down by the beach, you know, and I don't, and or is it more appropriate to play Western swing on a more traditional style ukulele without the Fender headstock? And so I did, of course, as usual, a lot of research into this, and the fact is this is kind of a replica of the Fender acoustic guitars that they started selling in 1962, but they came out with the original model of the Redondo CE in 1968, just quite a long time after Western swing was popular. But Western swing basically just turned into country music. I mean, everything that happened in Western swing ended up getting adopted into, especially like honky tonk music in the 1950s. And so it doesn't really make sense to just try and, like, if you're a musician, to just try and play Western swing alone, although there are a few bands that have done that. But if you're going to play Western swing, you might as well play honky tonk music, or especially country and Western music from the 1950s, which was all derived from it. Most country music in the 50s, though, they ended up not continuing to use the horn section, but in part it's like because the horns were kind of what diluted it more. Like they made, like if you listen to some of Bob Wills' recordings in the 1930s, some of it sounds just like Cab Calloway, especially that song 4 or 5 times he's doing the Heidi Heidi Ho thing, just the same way Cab Calloway was. Bob Wills in the 30s, his horns really sounded just like other jazz horns, and they sometimes totally took over the arrangement, and you can't really hear the guitars and stuff. And so, as to why on classic country music from the 50s they didn't leave the horns in most of the time, I think that they had to decide, if in a smaller orchestra, because the orchestras became smaller after the war, they had to decide how many musicians they were going to have on the payroll and what they were going to be playing. So I think what they did is they just lopped off the horn section, and they called it country and Western music. But before that they called it hillbilly music. It was just like the music that people were, I guess you could say, sort of was centered around like the Appalachian Mountains. But as there was also so many people in Texas playing basically the same type of music, as people continued to move west and all that, and especially like a lot of people came from Texas and Oklahoma, especially during the Dust Bowl time in the 30s, and came in search of work and found work in California, working in the agricultural industry, picking things and not getting paid very much money, but having all the same type of music. So like if you're one musician, and it's kind of like what's the difference between country and Western and blues music? I mean, there are some like Jimmy Rogers, he sometimes played sounds like slide guitar. Blues music, if you just have one guitar, you have to decide how you're going to tune it. You can play like slide guitar, like blues slide guitar, on any guitar, as long as you tune it to an open tuning and you have a slide, which I do have a slide here. And so that's something I don't know that much about. I just got the slide recently, and I'm not going to show how to play blues guitar, because in my case too, like if I just had the one guitar, it's not if you are tuning it and detuning it, if I'm changing it to like an open G tuning and doing that regularly, the strings are going to break on it pretty fast if you're switching tunings all the time. So if you just have one guitar, everybody who's the person who owns the one guitar has to decide whether they want to leave it in an open tuning and play like slide guitar blues on it, or if they want to leave it in a standard tuning and play any other kind of music. And if you leave it in the standard tuning, then you can play blues style music on it. But if you want to play blues, you might be better off putting it in an open tuning. So that's kind of the difference. It's like there's a lot of country songs that have the name such and such blues, but ultimately, if you want to play blues like optimally, I can't talk about every single blues song ever written, but I mean, a lot of them sound more like authentic with the slide guitar sound. And the slide guitar, the open tuning with the using the steel. This is brass, but the idea was something that existed in Nigerian folk music at the time that they started getting resonator guitars in the South. But you know, the birth of Delta blues. The idea of the open tuning was primarily coming from Hawaii at that time, and Hawaiian music, because Hawaiians were into the whole slide idea, and they preferred the slack key tuning, which is basically the same as the blues playing blues guitar. So when guitars were first brought to Hawaii, and it says this was in the late 19th century, Hawaiians didn't prefer to leave them in the standard tuning that was like the Spanish guitar tuning, and also the Portuguese machete. I don't know, it's got some longer name than that, but that's the precursor of the ukulele, is this small Portuguese guitar that only has 4 strings. And what that amounts to, I mean, there's so many things to cover, I guess, but what it amounts to for the ukulele is, if I want to play country and western music on a ukulele, there are quite a few classic country songs that are where the guy is singing about Hawaii, and I'm looking at those, and there's enough of them where you could play a whole show somewhere if you're playing in a cafe or something like that, and you don't want to have a big old guitar. I actually prefer how small this is and easy to deal with compared to the giant guitar, and also it's not as loud. Like, why was they honky tonk orchestras or large honky tonk bands, they did have a guitar with open tuning, the steel guitar, except for a steel guitar is a huge piece of equipment, so it's not like there was any like soloists playing just steel guitar with no band. It's like everybody who had a big electric steel guitar, which was how the first electric guitars were actually electric steel guitars, because the resonator guitars that came from Hawaii, I wouldn't say they came from there. Hawaiians just preferred the open tuning, and so large like guitar makers like Martin and then Fender would make these. They started with resonator guitars, which is like what Delta Blues is played on, and then they started making electric guitars because if you had horns in the band, the resonator guitar wasn't loud enough to be heard over the horns. But a ukulele has a piercing sound. It's not a loud amplified instrument, but it still pierces through where you can hear it even if there's other horns going on or something like that. But ukulele was not a normal instrument for like a large honky-tonk band or orchestra, but I think that you could play it, and it's totally viable and valid to play it if you're playing country and western songs about Hawaii. So the next thing I'm going to do is, because after I explore this further, then I'm going to get to the more mainstream country western songs, but I'm going to play a few songs first that are the classic country and western songs that I would play on a ukulele, And if I showed up somewhere with a ukulele and a cowboy hat, they would be the songs that I would play. If I show up somewhere with a big Fender guitar, then I would be prepared more so to play other country and western songs. But if all I have is a ukulele, then I would probably be starting with the Hawaiian repertoire. And I also think too that one thing that wasn't really included so much on in classic country, which is mostly like country from the 1950s, is it got to be where the west coast of the USA got to be more and more Asian, and also Hawaii too got to be more and more Asian, part of the USA, but separated from like a lot of the mainstream like Western artists wouldn't at the time in the 50s. I think Hawaii became a state in like the 50s sometime, but people kept thought of the two areas as separate, whereas these days they're not so separate. I mean, Hawaii has been a state for a long time, and I think there's a lot of plenty of country music fans who live in Hawaii and play music and all that kind of stuff, but they don't normally have a ukulele as part of say a Western swing band, but that's because they have a mandolin, or especially an electric mandolin, which is much louder, about the same size. So that's why I would say, like, for people who want to play ukulele but also want to be able to go tour the honky tonks of the American West, that you could tour those honky tonks and just play, Hawaiian Western swing on the ukulele. And you have the added advantage of also being able to play, a little small show at any given Hawaiian restaurant, which we have many, many of those. And also Hawaii is kind of the halfway to Asia point in the ocean. And so, you could probably play a ukulele at some sushi restaurant as well, because it might be possible. There's also some country and western songs about Japan as well, but not a lot about other parts of Asia that I've found so far. There's a few about Japan. There's lots, though, about Hawaii in the 1950s and 60s. Hawaii got to be more and more integrated into the mainstream of USA culture, including country and western music. I also realized that in part one there was some topics I didn't really touch upon, but the main thing is that the origin of country and western music was from the south part of the USA, where they were adhering to strict segregation in all manners of society, and so if you adhere to that, you have to believe in the way that races were defined in order to justify having slavery, basically. Like before the period of slavery in history, they started saying, that this is a white person and this is a black person, and it wasn't based on any science or anything like that. So to even label people as either white or black is kind of not the same. It might be the viewpoint that kind of comes across in the English language as we speak it in America, but it's not the viewpoint of people, especially who live on the Mediterranean, where, right across from Africa, and it's not the way people see things in Africa either. It's kind of the way people see things in the American South and also other parts of the USA. And it's still like there's still a lot of aspects of it that are present in the USA. But It was, it's like, okay, you people with lighter skin, you can hang out at this one place, and the people with darker skin are hanging out at this other place, and they're playing one kind of music at one place, another kind of music at the other place, and so it ended up being like, white people, so-called white people, were not didn't get into playing blues music or rhythm and blues music because they were, for the most of the time, and then gradually started being included, where it's like it's okay for someone with lighter skin to play that type of music. In England, all the in the '60s, everybody was listening to, blues music made by African Americans mostly, but they were totally okay with it because they didn't have the codes of segregation kind of, entwined in every single aspect of society the way that they were in the American South, but also we're also to a good degree in California as well. So because of that, country and western music was, in the 50s, it was the product of a heavily segregated society, but got to be gradually less so. And especially like when I was young, the biggest artist was Charlie Pride. But he's still, even now when I look at the classic country songs to find all these Hawaiian songs that I'm going to play on ukulele, he's still the only African American country and western artist on the classic country collection of songs. And that's just because it was artificially segregated in the South and in other ways in California. But just people think that it's you can't play this kind of music if you have a certain color skin. It's kind of like, you could also say, like, if your eyebrows are shaped a certain way, you're incapable of playing this music that we only have for the radio station for people who have their eyebrows shaped a certain way. Anyway, I also wanted to say that you can play like resonator guitar and a ukulele, and I wanted to demonstrate that after I figured it out myself. But you can tune, especially to like an open C chord. That way you just have to tune one up. You can play songs in C, and you could get a harmonica that complements that, and then you could actually play, Delta blues on the ukulele as well. Another thing is, like, someone who, the way that I've seen of the YouTube algorithm so far, I played a bunch of songs. I played like every single song that I could think to play, and I started getting a lot of views that presumably it's like the invisible algorithm chose for me. And so I got, at some points, a lot of views for doing like Johnny Cash songs, but then I also got a lot of views for doing Beatles songs. And the ones that I got the most views for were the most popular songs that were the most widely known for people who today speak the English language. So I think that it's like people who live on the other side of the planet who speak English wouldn't necessarily be into all the they wouldn't be necessarily knowledgeable about all the country and western songs there are. They would just know like the most popular country and western songs. So what I see is like, if I play the most popular songs ever written during a period of time anyway, I was getting, a few hundred views on that. But it's I don't know what I'm chasing. It's this algorithm that supposedly is, I don't know if the idea is that it's like a robot who's figuring things out with artificial intelligence, and at some point, or they're constantly improving the algorithms to make it so that it's just that any algorithm that's written in computer code basically comes from a overall philosophy or idea. And if I'm playing music in the Central Valley, in the Sacramento area, it makes sense for me to play some country and western songs, because we're in the middle of the Central Valley, and a lot of these classic songs came from the Central Valley, though, mostly famously from Bakersfield. And so that's part of like the history of California. And so if I have a whole bunch of home videos and photos that I've taken driving around California, I end up taking a whole bunch of pictures of like old cowboy towns and things like that. So around here anyway, it makes sense to combine like at least Western music, which I have done. I have learned how to play Western music some time ago, and that's always been a good thing to play just a solo on the guitar. But they started combining Western music with swing jazz music, long ago, starting in the 1930s. So it makes sense to incorporate everything that they were combining Western music with in those days, with as many other, basically like Bob Wills was combining everything that he could think to combine with it, I think, at that point, and even hiring musicians, accordingly, which he had like an endlessly, or enough money to afford to have a band that had a lot of musicians, including a whole dedicated horn section. But these days, of course, a lot of other types of music have. I mean, I also know how to play like classic rock music as well, believe it or not. But I'm interested in doing something that's distinct, and so if I go through a whole list of repertoire, which I did starting like last year around this time, where I was just trying to see how many views I could get. Like, if I play this type of song, how many views do I get on YouTube for it? I can see that it's like, well, some particular types the algorithm is trying to connect me with, and then I take it from that, like, maybe I should try and play this or that. But if I'm playing for a real group of people in the Sacramento, California area, then it makes sense for me to actually pick the songs that I'm playing based on what is going to please the audience most likely, and what it is that I can actually sing authentically from actual life experiences that I have, like picking out songs that have something to do with what I have experienced in life. And so instead of playing like country and western songs that were on radio stations when I was young, that I actually did listen to sometimes, it makes more sense to go on the web and look at all the country and western songs, and to pick out the ones that I feel like have something to do with my actual life that I've lived since then, and kind of focus more on the older songs, because if I'm playing songs by artists that are playing right now, then I'm much more likely to have copyright issues where I can't play the song live, or if I do forget and play the song live later on, like then I can't show the whole video of me playing somewhere. So as I'm testing it out, still kind of testing the waters, it's like it makes more sense to play classic country songs, which is what a lot, still a very valid sound for country music, a lot of those songs, and to pick the best ones that actually have something to do with my life, but also have to do with like, instead of me just singing about Texas all day long, which, you know, there's a lot more songs about, or I mean, especially starting from Western swing, like there's a lot of songs about Texas, there's a lot of songs about Oklahoma, and there are songs about California too, but a lot of them are like, you know, I'm dreaming to go to California and I'm gonna be rich and I'll be a millionaire there and all that. But I'm actually interested in those because I still live in California, and most of the like video footage that I have, whatever people may think of California, whether they like California or don't like it, since I live in California, what I have is a whole bunch of photographs and videos that I have photographed or shot the video of in California. So I might as well see if there's any songs that are, you know, exceptionally good about California, and play the best songs that have California as a subject, and especially, like, you know, like the California Zephyr, you know, Hank Williams. Of course, I'm going to favor that, but as far as like what is going to get me the most views on YouTube, I don't have high hopes that, at least what I've seen so far, that me playing these songs is going to make a whole bunch of people end up seeing me play them on YouTube, because it doesn't seem like the YouTube algorithm is geared toward that, which is okay. I'm not complaining, but that's what I need to do in order to be coherent, or like to play songs that make the most sense for me to sing, like that I can sing authentically. And I think that any singer has to face the same kind of choices of like what song they plan to play here or there, and so they end up choosing what the audience is going to, you know, or what they think the audience is going to accept as like a valid statement that they're actually making. You know, if you're singing songs that are patterned after your actual life, it seems like it seems like something that you might have written yourself, and then after you've figured that out, then you can actually write more songs that are similar to that. That's kind of the next thing that I'm interested in doing, but I think it's important first to figure out what are the songs that are most like the songs that I will eventually write. Oh, I thought of a few things while I was preparing for this presentation. I realized that I didn't talk yet about the Fender ukulele versus this more traditionally shaped ukulele. And the fact is, okay, so I'm talking about, a lot of the time I'm talking about this Fender guitar, which was designed the line was designed in 1962, but this particular model was originally designed in 1968. And Fender ukuleles, I was thinking that I wanted to play surf music on a Fender ukulele because I think it's cool, but Fender didn't start making ukuleles until 2017, I think. So there were not any Fender ukuleles during, you know, any period of classic rock or country and western or anything like that. This was the more standard shape of a ukulele. And in fact, at the time when the peak of western swing, which I think was during World War II, the soldiers were, on one report it said that they were issued ukuleles during World War One, but other sources say they were issued ukuleles by the U.S. government in conjunction with the Gretsch guitar company. So Gretsch made a bunch of ukuleles that were actually shaped round, and there are if you see pictures of servicemen playing a ukulele, usually it's shaped the same way as the pineapple ukulele that's made by Kala, which is I think it's their lowest priced ukulele. Eventually, I'm getting around to talking about Kala ukuleles because I don't think that it's necessary to play a Fender ukulele in order to be more like someone who was playing Western swing, because they didn't have them in those days at all, and they didn't even have them during the 60s or 70s or any of the times of these phases. They just had, this is like the most usual shape for a ukulele. This is exactly the way the Portuguese machete is shaped as well, but it has more of a brighter kind of sound. And so the servicemen in World War II had these, and in Western swing, swing music and also Western swing especially, that was the most popular music. So that's the most likely kind of music that all the soldiers were playing on their ukuleles would have been Western swing, because you can easily play Western swing on a ukulele, any song, and you can play anything on a ukulele. But it just they didn't usually have a ukulele player in Western swing bands because they had so many other instruments, like I said, and especially I don't think Bob Wills usually had mandolin, but the Texas Playboys that exist now, the leader plays mandolin. The guy who is the leader of that group now. So it's totally valid to play Western swing or country music on a ukulele, but it just there's just different reasons why they're not associated. But and especially like it wasn't just the soldiers. It's like anybody who would go to Hawaii would come back with a ukulele. I mean, and everybody was going to Hawaii, especially in the 50s. A lot of people were starting to fly places all the time for vacations. So not just the soldiers, anybody who, and in California too, we had ukuleles. Everybody had ukuleles starting in like 1910, but during the peak of Western swing time, everybody most certainly had ukuleles, and there was a lot of people flying to Hawaii because the war was being fought in the Pacific Ocean.